You think history is just facts on paper? Think again. Some tales are too strange to believe, yet truly happened. Strap in, we're going back in time to strange places, places filled with dancing plagues, hallucinating monks, and more. You won't find these tales in regular books. As we travel between centuries, get ready for the unexpected. What drove people to dance until collapse? How did ancient athletes dope for Greek sports? This story has it all. Medical mysteries, bizarre customs, and unseen worlds. So come along as we uncover history's hidden heritage, but fasten your seatbelt. This ride may shock. The ancient Incas used knotted strings called quipus to perform complex calculations and record historical information. Some speculate the quipus system was as sophisticated as the abacus, and may have even recorded narrative stories through knots. When Spanish conquistadors invaded in 1532, much of the Incan culture and knowledge was destroyed, including an untold number of quipus. Researchers are still working to translate the remaining quipus, unraveling an encrypted system from a vanished empire. During the medieval period, ear cleaning was a highly specialized profession. Known as auricularists or earwax extractors, these professionals had elaborate ear cleaning tools and procedures. They would examine the ears of the wealthy and royalty using tweezers, probes, and spoons in a meticulous process. Some patients even paid extra for a pleasant perfume or essential oil to be dropped in their ear canals after cleaning. This unusual specialty finally began disappearing in the 18th century as cotton swabs became more common. In 1801, President Thomas Jefferson authored a then law banning importation of enslaved people to the United States, though the international slave trade wouldn't end entirely for another 25 years. Yet shockingly, Jefferson himself owned over 600 slaves throughout his life. This juxtaposition of contradicting public decree and private reality is just one example of the complex relationship between some of America's founders and the horrific institution of slavery they both publicly condemned and privately benefited from. During the 1850s in Britain, bootblacking was a lucrative profession for young orphans and castaways. Known as climbing boys, these children were indispensable for cleaning above-ankle leather boots worn by gentlemen in the sooty, pre-vacuum London. They could wriggle into impossibly narrow chimneys, armed with only scrapers and lumps of carbon black polish. The work was arduous and dangerous, with many boys getting stuck and perishing in the chimneys. It wasn't until the 1875 Chimney Sweep Act that the practice was mostly outlawed. In 484 AD, a catastrophic volcanic eruption in Iceland spread ash across the northern hemisphere, obscuring the sun for 18 months. Historians argue this unknown eruption led to widespread crop failures and famine. Concurrently, waves of invading nomadic tribes swept across Europe, and the Roman Empire declined during this dark age. Recent climate modeling suggests another such cataclysmic eruption could shroud skies today for over a year, with disastrous global consequences modern civilization never faced. The 1500s were a height of exploration, but also superstition. Many European sailors believed the world ended where the Atlantic Ocean meets, refusing to cross invisible lines on simple maps. When Ferdinand Magellan set sail west in 1519, determined to chart the globe's circumference, his multinational crew mutinied once they passed the edge of their mental map, fearing sailing off the Earth's disk into the abyss. 3 years and countless hardships later, Magellan proved the planet was round by circumnavigating it, forever changing humanity's outlook upon the world. In 1918, at the height of World War I, a mysterious sleeping sickness pandemic swept the world. Called encephalitis lethargica, it caused victims to fall into a zombie-like trance for weeks or months, yet barely affected their life expectancy. To this day, its bacterial or viral cause and purpose remain medical enigmas. Some historians argue it may have influenced early 20th century culture by popularizing zombie myths just after a real waking death swept the globe during warfare. During the Victorian era in Britain, taxidermy was a popular hobby for the wealthy, aided by the colonization of exotic lands. Mounted beasts filled grand homes, but bodies decomposed, attracting insects. To combat this, taxidermists began preserving specimens with a mercury-laced arsenic solution. Few realized the process was extremely toxic. Over time, many animal collectors and their families succumbed to organ damages and neurological diseases like erethism or Mad Hatter syndrome. The toxicity of Victorian taxidermy practices was not fully understood for over a century. An outbreak of ergot poisoning plagued areas of France in AD 994 and led to disturbing hallucinations. The fungus grows on grains including rye, producing compounds similar to LSD. After eating contaminated bread, people began wild dances and trances they could not stop. Some had terrifying visions, began screaming they were on fire or thought oxen spoke. Over 10,000 died. Only recently have historians understood this strange event as a widespread accidental poisoning, giving insight into humanity's first recorded psychedelic experience. During the mid-19th century in parts of rural England, an unusual medical condition known as the dancing plague broke out among excited crowds. For months, groups of people could not stop dancing, sometimes to the point of collapse and death. The cause remains unknown, but was likely a case of mass hysteria where energetic dancing became contagious. Similar unexplained episodes occurred during other periods of hardship, perhaps reflecting psychological distress through physical expression. In ancient Greece, doping with hallucinogens was an accepted part of the Olympic Games. Runners and wrestlers consumed potions made from mixtures like opium, deadly nightshade, and hemlock to brace themselves for events. While enhancing stamina, these concoctions also brought on pain-numbing euphoria and hallucinations. The effects must have made for wild spectacles to early crowds. However, some competitors dropped dead from drug cocktails deemed perfectly normal at the time for athletes. During the late 19th century in the United States, snake oil salesmen proliferated as traveling peddlers. They advertised colorful elixirs claimed to cure any ailment imaginable. In reality, most contained only alcohol and herbs with minor placebo effects. Some products contained highly toxic ingredients like mercury or opium. When the American Medical Association began categorizing the frauds in 1906, over half of all patent medicines tested were found to either do harm or have no effect at all. It ushered in new consumer protection era. During the late 1800s in Scotland, reports surfaced of alleged sea monsters inhabiting Loch Ness. While sightings continue today, historians note the surge began when a newly built road provided tourism infrastructure. Local entrepreneurs capitalized on sightseers by offering boat tours and souvenirs depicting Nessie. Some argue it was an early example of purposefully seeding modern cryptozoology myths for commercial gain, demonstrating how folklore can be socially manufactured. In 1918, after a deadly influenza epidemic broke out at a Kansas military base, doctors tested a radical treatment on infected soldiers, breathing condensed steam from a special humidifier. Though results were mixed, it marked the first recorded steam inhalation therapy for respiratory illness. Decades later, vaporizers became mainstays of cold and flu season. Researchers today still study steam aerosol therapies against certain pathogens, showing antiquated remedies sometimes foreshadow modern medicines. During times of war in the Middle Ages, armies tossed diseased animal corpses over castle walls, hoping to infect those within with illnesses like anthrax and plague through biological warfare. While crude and indiscriminate, this marked early attempts at intentional pathogen weapons centuries before germ theory existed. However, sieges also fostered humankind's first quarantines as defenses against invasion by unseen deadly microbes.